Hello, my name is Dr. Jeffrey Olafsen. I am a professor in the Department of Physics at Baylor University, and my presentation today is about ITS, Information Technology Services, the first 50 years and before. These were conversations that I had with Don Hardcastle, who was a professor in the department who preceded me. He actually retired about the time that I was hired. I inherited his office. I got to know Don a lot. We had a lot of similar interests outside of work. Um, and I ended up, through a grant from the Baylor Institute for Oral History, interviewing him about his very pivotal role as very much the leader in the establishment of what became ITS at Baylor over about a 50-year span. Um, so what I want to talk to you about today is a timeline from about spring of 1967 to the spring of 2017, and three parallel kind of developments of seemingly inconsequential or at least unconnected events over those 50 years. And one of those is Don Hardcastle finishing his PhD in Texas A&M in 1966, myself being born in the spring of 1967. And while it may seem a little esoteric at first, this little show named Star Trek ending its first season on television. And all three of those things and how they evolved over a 50-year period. So I have to present basically 50 years of material, which through the Oral History Museum were condensed into 6 hours of conversations that Don and I had in about 20 minutes. That's a big topic, and that's a lot to cover, and probably more than a single lecture. In fact, I've given different versions of this talk from all the same material, several different places, spanning from 5 minutes up to 60 minutes. And so what I don't want this to be is, somebody just talking about, well, when I was your age, I had to walk uphill both ways in 6 feet of snow to use the computer. It's helpful. So what I'm really trying to do today is an advertisement for these interviews, which are part of the Baylor archive. So Don Hardcastle got a degree from Texas Tech in 1960. Move my camera here. Obtained his master's degree from the same institution in 62, his PhD degree in 1967. Interestingly enough, the field of physics that Don Hardcastle was formerly trained in was theoretical nuclear physics, which may or may not be the first thing you think of in computers. Myself, I have a similar but shifted story. I received a 1989 bachelor's degree in physics and math from the University of Mississippi. 91, I received a master's degree, and in 94, I received a PhD degree from Duke University. And my topic for my thesis defense is completely unrelated to Don's. I did work in superfluid helium. and finally, and this is just a brief overview of something you probably already know, if you've been watching TV at all over the last 50 years. Star Trek is this little TV show that was almost never made, was almost canceled, and was canceled. At its time, it was considered a failure. And then shortly thereafter, when the ratings started being divided into demographics, it was actually seen as a huge success in terms of that very vital 18 demographic. The inventors of a lot of different technology have been very public about their belief that the show had a non-negligible effect on the technology that they were working on. So the inventor of the mobile phone, Martin Cooper, has admitted that he was inspired by Herc. There were several different things on that show that at the time were complete flights of science fiction fantasy that are now reality in our lives. Everything from floppy disks to Bluetooth earpieces to tablets. And in fact, Motorola called its phone in the 90s Star Trek, unabashed homage to the show. And so one question, one direction that this talk could go is, did the writers of the show simply have a very good guess of what the future looked like? Or were the kids who were watching that show, as they grew up, became educated, and created what we consider today to be modern technology, simply want to create what they had seen that seemed so far-fetched in 1967, or is it just shatters? Moving on. Well, what ties all this together with ITS? What ties all this together with ITS is the personal computer, which will be a significant part of what we're talking about today, which has created its own culture shift in the last 50 years. And so the longer version of this talk, I really get into a discussion of, was Don the right person at the right place at the right time when change occurred? And part of that goes to the fact that if we hadn't had a graduate program in physics at Baylor, he would never have come to Baylor. And so to get ITS to where it is today, you really had to have that precursor, the physics graduate program. And if we hadn't, then things would have been very, very different. But what I really want to talk today about is the vacuum tube. I am just old enough to remember in 1971, 1972, going with my father down to the drugstore where they had one of these devices. It was a tube tester. And if the TV stopped working, Dad popped the back of the TV off. We looked for which tubes we thought were blown or hot or needed replacing. We'd take it down to this tube tester, and you figured out which one wasn't working anymore, bought the replacement, went home and fixed the TV yourself. Got implications for some of what we'll talk about later. So why am I so interested in the history of ITS? As a child of the 70s, there was a show called Connections, hosted by James Burke, and James Burke just has this wonderful way of looking at history. One of his axioms is that information causes change, and if it doesn't, it's not new, it's not information. Connections wasn't just the name of the show. Burke had some very interesting ideas about how information works. Innovation can be shown to follow a pattern. That's one of the examples I'm going to talk about today. History can be rather boring when it's taught as A to B to C, because it's not how it happens, it's how innovation occurs. Innovation arises from someone doing something unexpected. If it was expected, people would go from A to C instead of B, and then to C. So for what I'm trying to convey to you today, we need to do a little bit of a calibration. You get to participate in this. So here's the calibration. I need you to do the calibration for this talk. I'm going to show you a symbol and ask you to think about what the symbol is. Now, you may think that the symbol has more than one meaning. When I do this in person, I ask people in the audience not to shout out their answers. As we're all watching this individually, you still keep it to yourself. If you see that there are multiple answers after you've had a chance to think about it, that's okay. I want you to go with your first answer. So here is the calibration test. I'm going to show you a symbol. First thing that pops into your head. Okay, got it? All right. So here we go. If your first thought was that's a pound sign, you're in the version 099 beta test group. You're a little older. You're familiar with that symbol for a different reason. If you thought, yeah, it's a hashtag, you're in the version 1.0 group. If you thought it was tic-tac-toe, you're in the version 2 group. And if you didn't know what it was at all, you're in a different group. You're in version 3. Okay, so why am I doing that little bit of calibration? Well, question you can ask: what does a faculty office look like in 1967? This is a faculty office. It's a very famous office. This is Einstein's office as it was left on his death at Princeton. And what I want you to notice is what you see in this office. Blackboard. There's some books. There's some papers. He was a pipe smoker. There's a pipe on the desk. What is it? While you're thinking about that, here's another office. This is at CERN in 1973. This is the office for theorist Bell and Veltman at CERN. Notice what's there. Blackboard, books, papers, still a mess. The reason I'm showing these two pictures is that I really had a hard time finding a picture of the faculty office in 1964. Einstein's office was 55, their office was 73. You average those two, it's 1964. They're very similar. There's one notable difference. There's an IBM box on the top shelf in the office in 1963. There's no computer in the office. Here is the faculty office now. This is Dr. Greg Benish's office. He's a colleague of mine who just retired. And this is a picture of his office in spring of 2017. Notice there are some similarities and some differences. There's a whiteboard, there's papers, well, a little bit less of a mess than the other offices. For the aficionados, yes, that is a large-scale version of slide rule on his wall over the shelf. But if you take a look at this picture over a long period of time, you'll realize that the computers look different. And not only is the computer present in the office, it's now the focus of the office. Okay, so a little bit of a change of gears. In Hollywood, there's this idea that an actor has 5 stages to their career. And if they're one and done, if they appear in one movie, that career can be very short. If you're someone like Kirk Douglas or whatnot, and you live to be 100 or Olivia de Havilland, you can have a very long career, but every career, no matter how long or short, can be divided into 5 stages. The picture here on the up here is Ricardo Montalban, who was in Star Trek. And so the first stage is, who is Ricardo Montalban? He's first starting out, and when he's established, get me Ricardo Montalban. I want him. Get me a Ricardo Montalban type. Ricardo Montalban's too expensive. Get me someone like him. Then later, much later, get me a younger Ricardo Montalban. And then finally, the last stage of the actor's career is, who's Ricardo Montalban. For those of you aware of the Star Trek reboot, you'll understand why those pictures are up there. Which actor started this in Hollywood is a bit of a controversy. The common consensus is that it was Hugh O'Brien, but he never appeared in Star Trek. So those 5 stages, it very much came out in conversations with Don that those 5 stages are present as a cycle that continues to repeat itself in terms of technology. So as an example, what is an IBM PC? Go back to the 50s, ask a secretary or tell a secretary, I'm looking for your IBM PC, and she'll probably tell you what's sitting on her desk. Get me an IBM PC. Get me an IBM PC clone. IBMs are too expensive. Get me something cheaper. Get me a better, faster IBM PC clone. This is a Radio Shack Tandy computer. And then finally, the 5th stage. What is an IBM PC? Put that in there for the benefit of all of you Mac users. You can do this with many different examples, and many different examples of this came up in conversations with Don. What's the Usenet? Those of you who are really young in the audience may not know what the Usenet is. It was a text version of something that predated the internet. When you went onto the Usenet, one of the first things you usually did was join a Usenet group. Later, you might create the Usenet group. There is one very famous Usenet group named alt.wesley.crusher.die, because that actor, his role was not always appreciated by the fans. And then today, of course, it's Usenet. It's interesting, if you go up to Google, you can still find the Usenet. I did that the other day. I still have a million unread articles. Ideas like this are not something I alone have seen. There's a very nice book by James Glick, who wrote a book called Chaos. Another book that is more pertinent to what we're talking about today, called What Just Happened, Chronicle from the Information Frontier. And Glick's book is very meaningful to read. It's a good read for you because he talks a lot about the changes in technology that have more to do with sociology, psychology, and even capitalism. One of his big hangups is you go back into the 50s and try and sell a computer which doesn't work, it has bugs, and you have to keep posting updates. Your company probably would have died of death. The idea of tolerating a product that doesn't work is an effect of the product itself. And he may have stolen his ideas off Usenet. These are a couple of cartoons. Microsoft made cars, or if the person who's responsible for the little time bar on copying files on your computer actually worked for the Garmin people for GPS. Okay, so in terms of the archive that has been created by conversations that Don and I have had, there's a timeline that you can look at in 3 parts: 66, 79, 80, 93, and 2007. They are very much reflective of the person who ran Baylor at the time. So in the beginning, that was Dr. Abner McCall from 61 to 81. and even the university webpage describes his shepherding the university from its Model T status to Jet Age. And he was followed by President Herbert Reynolds, who came to Baylor with experience with NASA and really provided a lot of leadership to transition to a wired campus. And then finally, President Robert Sloan, who was president from 1995. And their influence is very much present in those conversations. In terms of the 5 stages of technology innovation, that pattern that we saw with the computer and with Usenet is repeated several different times. One of those is dial-up, in particular in the Sloan era. And so what is dial-up? Dial-up is literally when you used to take your hand phone set and put it in a modem that was built like your head, and then get me a dial-up account. Many of you may have had AOL accounts when you were young. Get me a better dial-up account, or better yet, get AT&T to start DSL. Get me something faster than a dial-up account. Most of us now have Wi-Fi of some sort, which then leads to the 5th stage of dial-up, which is dial-up. We don't support dial-up. One interesting footnote, I know my time is almost up, in terms of these cycles, is that there's almost something always left over as a residue. And IBM has left its mark. During the early times of the personal computer, the letters A and B became unused. All of the DOS-based PCs always had their programs installed on the C drive. If you get a new machine now, there is no A drive or B drive. They start at C, and it's this leftover from that cycle we've been talking about. We very much live in a house that Don Hardcastle built. I think of that every day when I'm at work. And so there is a 4th part to this timeline, which is what's coming in the future. And we really have been changed by what has happened. It used to be that faculty used to just give universities lists of 2 types of materials, equipment and supplies. With the ubiquitous nature of computers, there's now a 3rd category. Computing needs have to be updated. For instance, you can have really bad days like April 8th, 2014, when everybody's computer has to be changed on the same day because of things like the X-apocalypse, when you have to move to Windows 7. But remember the office. So the question, or the thing I want you to ponder, whether or not you ever get to go listen to the archive that Don and I built, is remember the office. No computer. Well, now you can do just about everything you used to do on your cell phone. What's going to happen to our offices now with the advent of the cell phone? And with that, I thank you for your time and hope you've enjoyed this overview